So just real quick before I jump into the presentation, just so you know a little bit about where we're coming from. My company is named #OnShelf. We are, as Kelly mentioned, we are organized around helping companies develop their trade marketing strategy and their go-to-market strategy for retail, including sales with the most influential retailers around the world. Our partnership is made up of three principal partners. Tony Cook, who is a retail executive, formerly with Walmart. He spent 27 years there. He was in operations out in the field. He moved into corporate and did various merchandise leadership roles. And then he finished up his career in visual merchandising. And so he's got a very broad background at Walmart. Our second partner is Bill Garrett. He was going to be here today, and so I'll be playing both roles today for you. Bill has a very unique background. He is one of the few folks who's been on both the retail side as a buyer and then also been working with big branded companies. And so he's got a tremendous amount of experience there. He started his career at PetSmart, spent his first years out of college there, and then moved into some big branded companies like you might know, Mars, Colgate, Palmolive, and Purina. And then just prior to joining us, Bill was running supplier development for Walmart International. So quite a broad experience. Myself, I've spent the first part of my career being a jack of all trades with Walmart. So you've heard a lot of the different roles and responsibilities around that customer. Analytics, supply chain, sales, and running the international businesses. And then for the last 10 years, I've focused on helping companies develop, or working for companies developing their international platform with the global retailers, the Auchans, the RT Mart, 7&I, Carrefour, of course Walmart, Costco, etc. So that's our principal team. The way that we go to market's a little bit unique. We have a member network called the Grow Biz Network. Those are executives that look a lot like us. Their experience is deep with both large branded organizations and also retailer backgrounds. And so they're positioned around the world near the headquarters to be our boots on the ground, if you will. So when Bill and I were putting this deck together, we were looking for something that would represent the path to shelf. And so what are these footsteps that you would take as you go down this journey of retail? And so we found the picture that's in the middle. And we put it in the middle of the deck, and we both kind of chuckled, and we said, well, gosh, that looks really organized and really simple and really easy. And we've never seen that in our careers. And so we started poking around on Google a little bit more for other pictures that might be representative of more of what we've seen. And so I think what you'll find, if you haven't already, what you'll find in your path is that you're going to find some challenges. It might be the picture at the top, which is an uphill climb with lots of choices and lots of steps ahead of you. It might be a picture like over on the left-hand side where you're positioned on a precarious cliff and you've got a great retail partner who's helped you, they've invested in your brand, they've been your partner, but to grow your business, you're going to have to start to expand. And you don't want to fail them and you don't want to feel like you're abandoning them, but that's the right thing for your business and you'll have to make a tough choice. You might find yourself at one of the pictures on the bottom where your business is just growing so much faster than you had expected that you've now got to find a 3PL or some additional distribution points. Some of the partners that we heard from this morning that talked about how important that element is. Your growth may facilitate your need to find a different direction and find new partners faster than you would have expected. And lastly, I have a rubble field off to the right, and I think one of the things that you'll find about some of the sophisticated retailers is that in their vantage point, they come up with some really neat ideas that oftentimes we haven't seen as manufacturers. They come up with neat ideas, and they might approach you about something like co-sourcing together to leverage your joint scale, which you hadn't really thought about. And so there's no clear footpath ahead of you, and you've got to find your way through it. So just to name the challenge or the problem that we're faced with, most of us as manufacturers, we've focused on a number of things. We're really great at design, and we understand the consumer and what they want. We design great packaging. We build strong brands. We know all of that. We're very satisfied with that. And then we get to this moment where we're like, okay, I'm ready to go to market. That should be the easy part. And we find out it's not as easy. And so what we're trying to do is develop, what we think is important for you is to develop a set of resources and a network of people who understand how to go that last mile. Bill would ask me if I was here, is that something like Shark Tank? Or he would have talked about Shark Tank probably. He would tell you that it's really interesting that you would see companies that have really proven themselves in the way that we talked about, and they go to Shark Tank, and they get there, and what inevitably happens is everybody's wild, they get great feedback from all four sharks, And one of the sharks steps up, usually Damon or Lori, and says, gosh, you know what? I happen to know so-and-so and so-and-so and so-and-so, and for a relatively large percent of your company, I'm more than happy to clear out the path for you. It's important to go ahead and find that network and establish that in a way that you don't have to be dependent upon that, and you can do what's right for your business without giving everything up. And it can be done. So how do you do that? So we heard a lot of talk about strategy today. I certainly won't try to define what strategy is, but what I will talk about is taking a strategic approach. Where my team gets involved is typically the corporate strategy has been set in place, the decisions have been made for the most part, and now we need to focus on those and we need to translate those in a way that are meaningful to your retail partner. I have two maps up here on the screen, and really the point here is that if we don't really know where we're going and we haven't called where we're going, there's lots of places we could go on the left, and there's many routes to get there. And we don't need to know, just to use an example, we don't need to know if we're going to Naperville or Wrigleyville, but we do generally need to know that we're going to Chicago. And if we know that that's where we're going, we can identify a path, and we can make sure that when retailers come to us and they stretch us in different ways, that we don't get pulled off cycle, and we don't get pulled into some great opportunities, but don't ultimately lead to where we want to go. And so that's a very key element for us as manufacturers, I think. We think of that as being tempted, right? Temptation can be a great thing, and it can pull you in an interesting direction. It can also take you off course. And so I think the message here is have your corporate philosophy, know what's accretive to your business, know what your business needs, not just getting an item, not just getting distribution, but be open to what are the other things that are going to help your business. As we think about that strategic approach, we think about channel partnership. So when we talk about trade marketing, this is really a key element that we're going to work through. When we start to work with a company, one of the things we're going to advise them on, just as we would with a big brand when we're developing, we're going to look at the landscape of retailers. You guys know who the retailers are, and there's a lot more globally, of course. But we're going to break those down into channels. And from those channels, we're going to decide what's our wish list, what's our dream team of retailers. And of course, why? Why do we want to work with them? And so it's important to recognize that if we've got an item that we're going to be going out in department stores, an example, that's where we really want to be focused at. We may want to not take an option to do private label or to do another product down the dollar channel. And the reason for that is it's going to potentially create some challenges for us. Setting our price image, what's the value of our brand, is it aspirational or not? Many of the things that Sean talked about this morning. What we do want to do, though, is take a look and say, essentially wipe the board clean and say, who are the best partners for this item? Why are they the best partners? Let's go prioritize those, and then let's spend our time and energy on that. Now, that's not to say don't be opportunistic. You definitely want to take advantage of all the opportunities that come at you, and you want to consider those within your framework. But you need to take a good hard look. You need to know who you want to go after, and then you need to find the right people to partner on that. So Bill here also said, well, Clint, you've got international as a channel. I've never heard that before, and probably a number of the folks in the audience are startup companies or they're just developing their business and starting to think about big retail. Why would they want to think about international, or should they think about international? Our particular point on that would be, as usual, it depends. That's our go-to answer. But it depends because international is risky. You'll hear that. It's got a lot of challenges, and it can be difficult. But on the flip side, if you look at it within your strategic approach and in your priorities, there's probably a number of countries that are going to work for you. And there is no passport for international, right? There's no passport for Latin America. They're all different. Even the dialects are different, as we all know, and the preferences. And so we want to identify a few places that we want to work at, and we want to find a method that gives us an opportunity to just find out in a relatively low-risk way how do we engage there. So that would be our suggestion when we think about international. The other element is many of the retailers that you'd find on the board and who are going to be interested to you, those retailers are now increasingly interested in finding different ways to bring innovation and new products to new markets. That's a big element for them. They see a lot of opportunity there. So you can get partners who are going to shoulder that risk with you. They're going to help you on inventory. They're going to help you on regulatory. They're going to help you in some other ways where you're not just going it alone. And you can find out, is my product actually going to work there before you roll out? So going back to my first comment about it's a great time to be in retail, but at the same time it's a really hard time to be in retail, this is probably the hard slide. So a number of years ago, the the retailers, really driven by a local retailer here, really started to sort of open their kimonos and ask for some help in terms of working cross-functionally across their organizations, helping them to understand a little bit more about how your business fits in with theirs and thus creating some interconnectivity. We really think of that as cross-functionality. And so now as you think about how are you going to start to engage with the retailers, you need to be thinking about being resourced in some of these softer areas, right? The day of sort of going and hiring a rainmaker, and that person is going to go in and they're going to take care of it in 2 or 3 calls and walk away and life is good. I'm not going to say those days are done because it still happens, but I think you've got to build a model that's built more around a sustainable go-to-market strategy. So sell, obviously key. There's a number of ways to do that, full-time, part-time, et cetera. But you need to think about also trade marketing. What are you going to do there? Do you have the right pricing and promotional strategy? Are you ready to go in and do you know what your cost basis is for the kinds of promotions that you want to do and the corrugate that you've got to have? We lump social media also into trade marketing, not in totality, but a key portion of it. We think that's a great way to tie into Kroger and some of the particular activities they might have, or a Publix and some of the activity. We can really be focused about our marketing efforts, and we've seen that we can get some really good ROI there. So something for you to consider. Replenishment doesn't get a lot of play for a lot of companies that are starting up. We found that can be a surprising area for you. So when you're looking at your supply chain and you think you've got it dialed in, you're probably, again, great at distribution, you're probably great with your transportation, you're probably doing a tremendous job on your fill rate. A lot of the larger retailers are asking for more. They're asking you to look at their system, to benchmark how their performance is. How is your forecast doing? Are you able to, or if they're overselling, are you going to be able to adjust your demand plan and help them out? Help them even with their replenishment settings in some cases. If you haven't planned for that, those resources could be a surprise to you or could set you up for failure because you just don't know what you're looking at. Analysis is really right along in there. Every retailer that I know of today requires some form of analysis. Maybe off their system, it may be through a third-party system. We saw RRI talking earlier today. Natural Channel has their own thing called spends. It goes on and on. There's just a tremendous amount of data out there. You need to pick where you want to play in the analytics space, but you definitely want to dominate what you do. And you want to be very careful about what you step up to. We hear category management a lot. Category advisory is a great tool. It's fantastic. It's extremely resource intensive. So just be clear and make considered choices about what you want to do there. Merchandising, we're probably all very familiar with. We've heard a little bit, I think Leslie from Cass talked about labor in the stores and how they would view that, and certain retailers are investing in labor and other retailers are expecting suppliers to invest in labor. You want to make sure that you take that into account as you're prioritizing your retail partners, I think. The last thing I'll talk about, just to touch on real quick, is the orders to cash cycle. We've had a couple of companies that really did not understand what this was going to take with some of the big retailers. And so just something to be aware of. You probably need, how are you going to get a order? You're going to be able to do EDI compliance, ASN, all that front-end work. Are you going to be able to process the level of detail that these big retailers want through your purchase order and respond back to them? And probably the biggest element of this is deductions have become a very big challenge, right? And we're going to make that as a big bucket of deductions. But are you able to reconcile that? And to what level do you want to reconcile that on the back end? I guess the bottom line is really understanding your prioritized retailers, understanding how they go to market, and then making sure that you're thinking about the resources that it may take. So scalable solutions. It's kind of a misnomer in a sense. We really view ourselves at our core as a technology organization. And so as we came upon this, we found an interesting quote that essentially says, you know, in today's world we hear about scaling this platform, scaling this technology, blah, blah, blah. And we think about it from a partnership basis. We think about the finding partners who are looking at the world in the same way that we do. And so in that way, we connect with them in a very organic way, and we're not finding mismatches. So I'll talk about a couple of those examples. So for an example, some of you will have a very low overhead model. The last business I worked on was a low overhead model. It was a food service business, and it was about it was a French fry business, and it was focused on India as an example. And so we needed partners who were not trying to create lots of work for us. We needed partners who did not have a huge cost model that was overburdening our product. And where we found that we had a partner that was misyoked to us, we just weren't competitive. Industry experience is obviously is a key for all of us, whether it's developing products, whatever it may be. As you're looking at your service providers, you want to make sure that these folks are tied in with the same type of background as whatever it is that your company is manufacturing. That could be food, beverage, whatever. Business complexity, not dissimilar from the overhead model. And this really comes back to questions being put back to you. You want to find these partners that are synergistic. You want to be looking for partners who have the ability to communicate with you in the way that you need and the same systems that you need. They're not asking you for, if you're a simple organization, they're not asking you to go learn 10 systems and buy new equipment and all of that. You don't probably have time or energy for that. So you want to find partners that match up to you on that. We call out branded or private label. We found that to be a very significant differentiation between business models. So the value proposition on branded is something that's entirely different. It is more about talking about the product, talking about the consumer. It's really driven in a pull mentality. When we look at private label, we see that as a very different model. That ends up being much more of a project management organization. It's working in a very collaborative way with the retailer. It's hitting their marks and helping them to benchmark. So we've just found that finding partners who understand that is a key enabler for you as you go forward. Customer experience, it's hard to not really talk about that. As we're talking with partners around manufacturers, being partners in this case around the United States, oftentimes they're trying to find someone who can be, let's say, a solution to everyone. And what we found is that understanding the customer, understanding how they work, being able to navigate across them, knowing when it's appropriate to go up or down the food chain or to start to move into cross-functional areas is absolutely key. Take your time and find those right partners for yourself. And the last one's a little bit tricky, probably the least sexy up here, is really around corporate alignment. And this one I think is a very interesting one, and that is that all of you as manufacturers or brand owners, you've all spent a lot of time and energy building strategy. In my earlier example, you've probably taken a course that you're going somewhere and you want to create something. And so I think it's very important to work with people who are able to take your corporate strategy, repackage that in a way that's digestible for your customers. What you don't want to have happen is whoever you're working with constantly telling you that your corporate strategy needs to be tweaked this way or tweaked that way or tweaked the other to fit whoever their particular customer is that they're working with. And I'm not going to say that there's not value in changing your model up in a certain degree of customization, but it has to be always within the context of what you want to achieve. And so I would just be very cognizant as you're working with teams to make sure that they understand corporate strategy and they have the ability to translate that. That's key. Went a little bit faster than I'd expected. At hashtag, this is my closing slide. I just wanted to sort of recap most of our bullet points from the day into the way that we look at the world. We look at the world as an ecosystem. You as a brand owner or a manufacturer are really the gardener of that ecosystem. An ecosystem says things will come into the system that haven't been there. They will grow, they will do well, and they will move on. That's just an part of the business. You as the gardener have to maintain that. You have to be the one who's pruning. You're the one that has to be culling out the things that you don't want there anymore. You have to take a very conscious role in this model. I would tell you that, and I won't go through all these bullet points, but I would tell you to take a couple of key learnings away, or I would hope you take a couple of key learnings away from this and focus on a few of these areas. My personal favorites here are, number one, you want to make sure that, again, you've got a key understanding on your analytic platform. You want to make sure that you've got the ability to engage your retailers around your total analytic needs and replenishment. The second thing I would tell you is, in my view, is this notion of finding network or a pool of resources that understand the retail partners at a very deep level. You've got to be able to work with folks who are going to be able to know when it's appropriate to come into an organization at a buyer level, or when it's more strategic and needs to come in at a platform level. They've got to understand when to move across the different cross functions. I can't really stress that enough. That can be the difference between success and failure. The parting thought that I would have is really the last bullet point there, which is around passion is awesome. I love working with entrepreneurs. We heard earlier the passion coming forth when someone creates a new product and they bring that to market, and it's an awesome feeling. It's great to see their eyes light up and really get excited about what can be done. That's really awesome, but that gets you one thing. That gets you the opportunity to compete on shelf. And from there on, it becomes about execution. And so don't lose sight of execution within your model of going to retail.